If this looks like something that you would do, oh boy am I about to change your life forever. CMake is possibly the most annoying tool known to mankind, but it doesn't have to be this way. I found easy fixes to the most common CMake problems, like file path problems, a Visual Studio configuration that makes sense, and that you don't have to regenerate every time you change your CMake or add files, and others, making it a tool that is actually nice to use and can help you with adding libraries. This video is long because I also explain why I do things like this, and also because I want to cover every possible pitfall, but take things step by step. And trust me, using CMake like this can save you so much time and headache in the future. Yes, there will also be weird problems from time to time, but for the most part, you will be able to add libraries very easily without weird downsides. And while it's not perfect, I found it way better than most alternatives, so let's go! Also, if you don't know the basics of CMake, I have a video about that. But now, let's start with project configuration. So normally, people will pop out the CMake tool and generate their Visual Studio solution like this, but this is just horrible. This generates this weird project setup, like what are these things? And this folder structure is nonsense, like it is not how I configured my folders. And I need to now do this to select the right project, and I haven't mentioned that if I add a new file, I need to regenerate the solution again from the CMake tool. If it takes so much to do something as simple as adding your file, you shouldn't use that tool. So fortunately, there is a way better way of doing things, and that is to go here, right click, and select Open with Visual Studio. Alternatively, you can go here and open the folder with the CMake file. In this way, CMake is integrated with Visual Studio, so these steps of generating the project will be done automatically by Visual Studio for every change. Now go here and press this button, and you will be able to see your folders exactly as you configure them to be structured. Now select the project that you want to open from here, and to add your release configuration, you do this. Okay, now let's talk about some problems that can happen. Yes, there are still problems, but they are less bad than the alternative. First of all, if you get weird Visual Studio errors like ones that tell you that it can't find the compiler, check if you have the right components installed. If not, I found that reinstalling CMake and Visual Studio can fix this problem. So take the loss, reinstall them, but you have to make sure you check options like this. Now, whenever you add a file, Visual Studio will ask you if you want that file to be added to the CMake. This can be nice if this is what you want, but regardless, the project will be regenerated automatically to take the new file into account. And if you want to do it manually, or it just didn't regenerate it for some reason, just press Ctrl+S inside the CMake file to regenerate the CMake. Always check for CMake errors. Now, sometimes you might need to do a full regenerate to make sure all of the new settings are applied correctly, or when you get weird errors, sometimes a hard reset can fix that. To do this, all you need to do is delete this out folder and regenerate the CMake file again. Finally, the last problem is if you want to profile your project. Sadly, this doesn't work from here. You need to generate a normal Visual Studio solution for that, but you usually have to do that very rarely. So to do this, please, instead of using this tool, just go in the folder where you have your CMake, make a new folder called build, go inside this folder and open a command prompt here, and type cmake ... And that's it, way faster than messing with this tool. Now, let's look at how I configure my projects. First of all, I never link to precompiled libraries using lib files and DLL files, and I never install libraries like you see people do. I just put all of the dependencies for the project in a folder as the full project each, and I also upload them to GitHub. And separate projects don't share dependencies. And then, I read them like this in the CMake, and I can link to them. I know that this is against what many people do, but linking to precompiled libraries that are installed only once in your PC comes from a time where it was more common to have closed source things, and they also tried to save some disk space. And this practice remained. But for what I am doing, and what you are probably doing, just putting all of the dependencies in the project to be compiled together has so many advantages, so let's talk about them. First, I can easily debug the code from other libraries. They are not precompiled, so I can just step into it, and I can even modify the code. And that is another advantage. I can modify the library code if I need to, and yes, that happens often. Like, I might want to add some plugins to a library, or do some small changes to make the library compile on Linux. Imagine doing this when you share your library with multiple projects. You fix one while breaking another. Not to mention you would manually need to recompile the library for every change. And what about installing a library globally? But now you need a different version of the same library for one project. This happens often in Python, and surprise, they solved it by not installing libraries globally anymore, and instead, installing dependencies for each project separately. And this is what I do. I can just put inside the dependencies folder exactly what I need for each project. Also, I can compile the project how I want. If you link to a precompiled library, the compiler settings of your project need to match for it to work. So if I change the runtime linkage settings, I can't link to that library anymore. So now I need a precompiled library for every possible version. Bro, this is just madness. However, if I build a library with the project, I can build it with any settings I want, in any OS, all in one build step. And I can easily change compiler settings. And no, it doesn't take more time to build. After you build the first time, the compiler won't rebuild things that haven't changed. So compile time speed is not a problem with this way of doing things. And the only aspect remaining is disk space, and that is not a problem either. Plus, on GitHub, you have all the space in the world to store the dependencies, and let's not forget that if you put your project on GitHub like this, people can just download it and compile it without any problem. And yes, there are exceptions like bullet physics is a big library that takes a lot of time to compile and a lot of space, but that is an exception rather than the common case. By the way, this is how my gitignore looks like. Using CMake like this will put all of your build things into one folder instead of placing CMake cache files all over the place. So you only need to put this folder in the gitignore plus the IDE specific folders, and that's it. No more need to use weird gitignore files because your tools are irresponsible and put build things all over the place. Now let's move to file opening. If you have used the CMake before, you probably know that when you open your project from Visual Studio and when you open your project from your exe, the directory that the program will search for files will be different. So many people, for example, make it so it works to open the exe file, but you can't open the program from Visual Studio, so you can debug your program. I have this solution. I add this compile definition from the CMake that has an absolute path pointing to the program's resources. Whenever I want to load a file, I have to do this. Then, when I finally want to ship this project, I change this to this, so that it just removes the absolute path. And I can just ship the project along with the resources files. Speaking of shipping the project, have you ever seen that before? Well, by default, the compiler will compile your project with a dependency of the runtime library, and you need to ship your program with that runtime. You can't expect the other PC to have the right runtime or to find it in the first place because it won't. Don't believe me? Look at how many copies of the runtime I have on my PC. These copies are here because of programs that have been shipped with the runtime library. So, rather than shipping my programs with a runtime installer, I would rather just link the runtime statically. And this is how to do it. But I would say to not worry about this if you don't intend sending your compiled program to others, because it can give you headaches with weird errors when linking to some libraries from time to time. As you can see here, for some libraries, you need to add some flags before doing add subdirectory. Next, I honestly don't like adding each CPP file like this. To me, this just seems the laziest thing to do ever. And yes, it totally makes sense sometimes. But for the common case, what I like to do is to use this line that will define a macro holding all of the CPP files in the project. Whenever I add a new file, it will be automatically added, so make sure you click No here, because you don't want Visual Studio to also add it again. And for the include files, I do this. And even though this is not recommended for some reason, it never gave me any problems, and I have been doing this for multiple years. And the final tip is to keep the CMake simple. Like, look at this. Can you understand anything here? This CMake is so complicated, probably for this library to work well with various configurations and stuff, but you just want to compile a project, so there's no need for it to be overcomplicated. Look, this is how I set up my project. I set up the C++ version. I link to the runtime library statically. Here I need to set some flags about some libraries. I load the libraries. I set the macro to hold all of the CPP files, and also the resources path macro. I set some defines and flags for the project. I set the include directories, and finally, I link everything together. And that's all a CMake project should do for the most part. I see people put flags together into a macro, or like put the CPP files into a macro, then the header files. Bro, just keep things simple. Do that weird stuff only if it has a benefit. If you also want to see how I make the CMake for the libraries, check out this video. Now, if you want to see more details about my configuration, or use it to make a game, check out this video, and you will also find the link to this CMake in the description. I highly recommend taking a look and try something similar for your project, and if you ever get stuck, you can join my Discord server and ask me directly for help. See you!